Great to see you all. Great to see you all. I feel a certain, even a week off, and I feel a certain sense of longing. We didn't meet last week. It's been quiet holiday times, and I always say the same thing when we skip a week, which I can't come back and I feel like something's missing. Like it's not good to skip a week, even though we all need a break. I need a break, but the idea is there's always a Parsha. So then last week we didn't study Vayechi together, and I feel bereft. And I hope you studied Vayechi on your own. I hope it's great that we gather together. And I hope, the larger vision is that we all become students of the Parsha and that we're in it every week. So where are we now? We're at the end of this big kind of big moment. We're at the end of Sefer Bereshit, of the book of Genesis, and Parshat Vayechi, that last Parsha, and then next week we will turn to the greatest story ever told, right? I think that's what Spielberg said, to Exodus, and they're very different books. It's incredible that our Torah manages to deliver that kind of epic after that kind of epic, but there are very different books, and as we begin the book of Exodus next week, we'll begin to think about very different themes. So far we've been mostly mired in family and family drama and interpersonal ethics, but not just ethics, just relationships and struggling through what it means to be a human living with other humans in the first kind of unit of gathering, which is the family. But as we turn to the book of Exodus, we're going to think about what it means to live with many humans in society, eventually in a state, and the Israelites will not have a state of their own until after the journey, but this theme of the state is already quite prominent, obviously, in the book of Exodus, because it's Pharaoh's state that they're now living under. And so it is time to begin to think about power. Power is going to be one of the big themes of the book of Exodus. And so it is fitting, maybe intentional, that there is one line in this week's Parsha that serves as a kind of a primer on questions of power and authority in Jewish thought. This line is a kind of a little dense little code that has in it a whole political theory, at least as rendered by some of our commentators. And so we're just going to spend all of our time trying to unpack this very dense and famous but difficult and strange line that appears in the midst of Jacob's blessings to his children, which themselves are given over in the form of poetry and mystery. It's not like Jacob is saying things that are cryptic and not easily understood, and so this line is not easily understood, but it does become hugely important for Jewish thinking about power, rulership, dominion, and eventually the state, the figure of the king. Okay, so let's the figure of the king, which I should say, is the figure that begins the book of Exodus in a terrifying, in a negative cast. So what does it mean that we eventually head towards kings ourselves? That's also one of the great questions that the book of Exodus presents us with. Okay, let's begin. Let's say a blessing, and then we're gonna really dive into this one verse and see what sense we can make of it. Okay. Blessing over our study together. May it make us sharper political thinkers, among other things. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Okay, so here's the verse. Let's just dive in and take a look at the verse. And the verse, as I said, appears in the blessings that Jacob gives to his sons, who will become tribes. Vera, I'm going to need screen sharing capabilities. I seem not to have them. Okay, there we go. All right, so let's take a look here. My computer is also a little slow this morning. Okay, so this appears in the blessing for Judah, and that's significant as well because Judah, along with Joseph, seems to have become they emerge as sort of the two most important figures, at least in the drama of the book of Genesis. And indeed, Judah, the name Judah, the very name Judah has got a ring in your ear. It has a kind of a resonance that will soon feel very relevant because the tribe of Judah ascends to great power, but we see hints of that already here in this blessing, in this line that we're going to take a look at. And the phrase that we're going to look at is Lo Yasur Shevet Mi Yehuda. The scepter shall not depart from Judah. Okay, so Jacob blesses a few in birth order, a few of his sons, so Reuben, Shimon, and Levi, and then the scepter shall not depart from Judah. Okay, Lo Yasur Shevet Mi Yehuda. Ugh, my computer is speak up or let Vera know if anything is not working because my computer seems a little slow. Okay, but lo yasur shevet mi Yehuda, the scepter shall not depart from Judah, umechokek mi bein raglav, nor the staff from between his feet, ad ki yavo Shiloh. And this gets things get really cryptic here until Shiloh comes. Until Shiloh comes. Who's Shiloh? And the devotion of all people shall be his. Velo yikatamim. The obedience, the devotion, the homage is the translation that I actually got at first. Okay. So Lo Yasur Shevet Mi Yehuda, that phrase especially becomes kind of a quotable. Why is it so significant that Jacob is saying the scepter, the shevet, and shevet is a word that we will come to see again and again and again, but usually it's translated shevet as, as tribe. Okay, so it's related to the shevet is the dominion over a certain group of people. Okay, the tribe is it's when you have the shevet, you have it also means scepter, right? Like a king's scepter. Now, why is it important that the scepter will be Judah's? Who is the Judahite that holds the scepter? Again, I'm just gonna. This is the kind of question that I'm just gonna let you answer, out loud or in your head. No, but Hiro will do it for us. David. Say it again, Hiro.
David.
That's correct. King David. King David, the great figure of even though we're ambivalent about kingship and we have Pharaoh and kings are bad. On the other hand, one of our kind of greatest heroes was King David. And King David, after the Torah, the books of Samuel, that document King David, is sort of the next great epic of Hebrew literature. King David the righteous king, and King David the pious king, King David the sometimes morally questionable king, but King David, the great and glorious King David, right, was a Judahite, came from the tribe of Judah. And there had been one king before him who was a Benjaminite, King Saul. But after King David, the monarchy has been established. It flows through his family, and then King Solomon, and then a series of kings who, who descend, increasingly into chaos, wickedness, debauchery, right? So, okay, so there, as I've said that, we have before us a bit of a dilemma, because on the one hand, we've done the first part of the decoding Hiro has for us, which is Lo Yasur Shevet Mi Yehuda. The scepter will never depart from, look at my cat right there. You see that? The scepter will never depart from Judah, from the tribe of Judah. That's an allusion to the Torah's like prophesying the coming of the Davidic kingdom and the Davidic lineage that will proceed after King David. So that's true. The kingdom of Judah, this becomes a kind of a way of speaking about the great and glorious monarchy of all of the people of Israel, because King David united the whole of Israel. On the other hand, what's the problem right away with saying that the scepter will never depart from King David, or from the family of Judah? What's the problem with that? I'm asking a lot of just sort of like, identification questions up front here, right? We'll get into a discussion soon, but what's the problem with saying that the scepter will never leave the family of Judah? The rulership will never leave the family of Judah.
It does. It does leave the family of Judah.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you. Exactly right. It does. It does. If in no other, I mean, there's warring over rulership in Israel, but the most obvious thing is that eventually the monarchy is toppled. The first great exile, the Babylonian exile, the house of the king of Judah finally falls and is never really fully reestablished. So what do you mean, Lo Yasser Shevet Mi Yehuda? Let's not hang our hats on that line, because indeed the scepter does depart from Judah. Okay, so we've got a problem there. Okay, but let's just look at the rest of the line, and let's start to talk out just a little bit. I don't know how well equipped we are, but let's give us a moment to breathe here and see if anyone wants to just respond to the scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the staff from between his feet, until Shiloh comes. And again, we don't yet know who Shiloh is. Shiloh, it is a city. It's named as a city in Samaria, but that doesn't seem to be, they wouldn't be coming. So here it seems to be a person's name, and the commentators can't quite figure it out. We'll soon see interpretations, but then the devotion of all peoples shall be his. Now, this is a question we could ask all the way through Jacob's blessings, because they're all so difficult to understand. They're kind of poetic and, as I said, mysterious. But okay, we've kind of taken that first phrase and thought about how it might apply as a kind of prophecy for the future. Now that we've got the other phrases here, any sense you can make of what just in the plain, what we call the Pshat, what is Jacob saying about Judah, that the scepter will never depart, and nor the staff from between his feet until Shiloh comes? Anybody got a read on this, or have studied it before, that wants to offer some interpretation before we take a look at the commentators? No. So far, no, and that's fine. That I wouldn't either. I didn't. Okay. We do have now we have two. Okay, so we'll take two. Lawrence Zuckerman.
Yeah, it's Larry. Are we talking about a Messiah?
Good. There you go. Okay. Ding, ding, ding. That is the way we'll soon see. That is the way this Shiloh figure has been understood. It's one of the names of the Messiah. And that's like the big, ding, 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 because
this is
that's part of what we're going to be turning around. What is
the Messiah that's coming before the fall of two temples? So
that's coming.
Didn't exist.
That's coming already, you're saying?
All right.
Good. Okay. All right. So is this the Torah never speaks about a Messiah is this a subtle allusion to the Messiah? Okay, so good question. And then I saw Yael also, but maybe Yael was going to say the same thing. Okay, so let's take a look, because that's right. Larry's right. That's where Rashi goes. But the Rashi, the kind of our most famous commentator, the Rashi, we say the Rashi on this verse, like the commentary of Rashi on this verse takes each of the phrases in order. And in this Rashi, I mean, this really is the decoding. There are lots of interpretations of this verse, but Rashi's is famous, and we're going to use Rashi's interpretation to try and unpack what I'm calling like the political theory that's embedded in this verse. So let's take a look at what Rashi says on each of these three pieces. So here's our 11th century commentator Rashi. Rashi says, Lo Yasser Shevet MiYehuda, the scepter shall not depart from Judah, even after the house of David ceases to reign. Now, you can see Rashi was bothered by the same thing that we were bothered by. Like, that doesn't make sense, because eventually the monarchy falls. And Rashi's saying, yes, but even after that, there will be some form of rulership that Judah will continue to have, for this refers to the chiefs of the exile. Here in Hebrew, it's Roshei Galuyot Sheba Bavel, in Babylon. So there is a Babylonian conquest, takes place in the 6th century BCE, and many of the people are driven into exile in Babylon. But there remains a kind of Israelite community in Babylon, and as is often true with conquering powers, they appoint heads of the exile, and that's what Rashi says. These heads of the exile, meaning when I say heads of the exile, I should unpack that a little bit more. They are in charge of the Jewish communities. Jewish is probably still not yet the right word, Israelite communities in Babylon, right? So the Israelite communities are separate, and they have kind of like the mayor of that community, but the mayor has been appointed by the Babylonians, and that's what Rashi says. They hold dominion over the people. Okay, so here we're really starting to think about power, and this language, rodim, is really like, not just that they rule, but they're almost like hold total authority over the people, with the scepter having been appointed by the monarchy. Okay, so the monarchy here is not King David's monarchy, but the Babylonian monarchy. Okay, Nebuchadnezzar. So that's the first piece, is that Rashi is saying there's always going to be some rulership that Judah will hold. Even when the kingship falls, Judah will still be our leader. So it's a prophecy about how Judah will always reign in Israel. And even in times of exile, there's some Judah descendant figure that is, we can see this even in the Babylonian exile. Okay, now what about the other pieces? Nor the staff from between his feet. Now, you know, the way the commentators interpret the Torah, poetry is just like open season on interpretation, because there's no such thing as an extra phrase. So if the poet repeats a kind of a sentiment, it must mean something different. So if the scepter shall not depart from Judah, and then also the staff from between his feet, the staff, the word here is mechokek. This refers to the scholars of the Torah, Talmidim, and they are the Nisi'im of the land of Israel. Now, the Nisi'im is often translated as the prince. Yehuda Nasi was Judah the prince, right? But that prince is a little bit of a funny word to use here, because it starts to feel like monarchy, when actually the point of these Nisi'im is that they are scholarly leaders. They oversee the work of the court, right? And there are still Israelites in the land of Israel, though some have been driven into the land of Babylon. And so there are political leaders in Babylon, but there are there remained a community of scholars in Israel. And Rashi is saying, that's the distinction, that's the separation here, is that there's political power that belongs to Judah, and then there's the staff, which refers to the scholars. Now, how is that connected to Judah? Is a question that I want to like keep out, put a sticky in, as my teacher Rabbi Lappi would say. Okay, and let's just finish out the Rashi here, because Larry was exactly right. And I'm not saying we're getting clarity, right? But we got soon. These are the key pieces, and once we have all these three pieces, then we'll spending the rest of our time trying to make sense of them and create a political theory out of them. But you have the heads of the exile in Babylon, Roshei Galuyot Shebabavel, who have been appointed by Babylonians. Actually, you have the scholars of the Torah in the land of Israel, the Nesiim, the presidents, really, the president of the remaining community. And then you have until Shiloh comes. Melech HaMashiach, the Messianic king. Melech HaMashiach, right? You hear Chabad use this phrase a lot. Melech HaMashiach, the anointed king, the anointed king. And I should just, let's finish this Rashi. The Messianic king will come, and the kingship shall be his. And the word for his in Hebrew is shalo. So the commentators and Onkelos, the famous Aramaic translation, also renders it this way. Shiloh is a form of shelo, which means his. So it's a little bit funny way to read this verse, but it's until the one comes for whom the kingship is his, aka King Messiah, Melech HaMashiach. Right? And I should hasten to say, now that we're talking about the Messiah, because it's very, the Messiah has become so prominent in other religious traditions, very easy to get confused. We have a concept of a Messiah, but specifically it is the distinction is that it is a king, a king who has been mashuach, anointed, literally like doused in oil, anointed by God. So there's a divine mandate, but the Messiah is not a figure of divinity, right? So our Messiah is not someone who is God, a God or God-like, but has been tapped by God. And that's Melech HaMashiach, that's the Messiah, and that concept exists in our tradition. But there you go. These are the pieces. Okay, this blessing that is given to Judah is that there will always be political power that will be held by Judah, says Rashi, even in times of exile. Then there will be also, and we haven't figured out exactly what this means, but there will also be sort of scholarship, a group of scholars, right? And these are two groups that are read into the two phrases, the scepter and the staff. And then finally, until Shiloh comes, and that's Mashiach. Okay? All right. So now, what do we do with all this? Let's just see. Now we have, again, I would be very understanding if you still are completely silent, because we don't have a lot of, this is still very cryptic, but I see we've got some of our interpreters on deck. So let's see what folks are making of it. Let's start with Leah.
Is it about shepherdship? Are our scholars, our shepherds? I mean, I'm drawn immediately into the 23rd Psalm. Your rod and your staff, they will comfort me. And then a little further on, you're anointed, or I don't know where it goes, but you anoint the head or somebody's head with oil. So for me, not to disagree with Rashi, but I was more connected with the idea that Judah will shepherd us rather than be a king, but that we will be able to take comfort feel comfort and security in his leadership.
Okay, great. This is Leah gives us some key pieces of information and consideration. And so let's take a pause and try to unpack what she's saying and the question she's asking, specifically about the mechokek, the staff, and this group that gets associated with the scholars. And I didn't think of that at all, but I love that you quoted Psalm 23, Shivtecha umishantecha, which are again to the Shivtecha Shevet, the scepter, and the Mishantecha is more like a cane or but it's not something you would lean on. Now, the word we use here is mechokek. So let's just think about that word for a second. Let me put it on screen so that we can see it. The word mechokek, here it is, mechokek, which is the staff. Now the staff, it's a staff, and this is the scepter. The scepter is related to that, to the word for tribe, and it refers to power, okay, political power, royal power. The mechokek is related to the language of carving. So that's why we read this as a kind of a wooden staff, not a metal scepter. Okay, I mean, I don't know I don't know how scepters work, but this word is related to the word for a carving, and therefore a carved staff. Okay, now. So just like in the Psalm that we mentioned, there are these two images. There's the Shevet, and then there's the Mechokek. There's the scepter and the staff. Now, what does that mean, that there might be a scepter and also a staff? Well, the other connotation of a Mechokek is legal. And in fact, one of the words for law in Judaism is chukim, because laws are also chiseled out, carved, fashioned and cut up and decreed, right? Issued. So the word mechokek means a carved thing. It has the image of the staff in it. It also means and sometimes translated as law-giving or the lawgiver. And here's a verse where you see the word mechokek used in that way. Let's see here, down here. This is in the blessings that Moses gives at the end of the Torah, right? They actually in a parallel section. So it's interesting, the word appears again. For there is the portion of the revered mechokek, where the heads of the people come. And who is the mechokek? It was just a staff up above, but now it seems to be a person. And who is the mechokek? Well, whoever he is, that person executed God's justice and God's judgments for the people of Israel. Sidkat Hashem asa umishpatav im Yisrael. Okay. Oh, I think I saw that as Am Yisrael, so I translated the people of Israel. Judgments for Israel. Okay, so there's just a little bit of a feeling for what is this mechokek image, and who are these scholar people? Well, let's just think about it for a sec, and here we'll I hope a lot of you are feeling ready to unlock the first kind of clue here in our little code. Who is the figure who was a lawgiver in the Torah? That should be already easy to answer, right? People are nodding. Moses. And what did Moses carry? A staff. Okay. Now things are getting interesting, because we've got the scepter of King David and the staff of Moses. Okay. And then we've got the Messiah figure, right? I don't yet know what to do with him, or maybe, who knows, maybe it'll be a her in the long sweep of time. But we've got these two figures. Okay, so let's just keep, other people have had interpretations, but that was a big unlocking through the questions that Leah was answering. And so now let's think. Moses has a legacy. Moses is not from the tribe of Judah, by the way. So more to think about there. Matt Silberstein.
Actually, what set me off was when you said that all the blessings are cryptic. And that's one of those things that rings a bell with me, because I think on some level, this was meant to be understood at the time rather than delved into in just esoteric. And I think maybe this is one of the places where something like documentary hypothesis helps us, in that this is a piece that's political for the time of the Torah, saying, hey, we got a king, guys, and we've got a ruler, and let's remember that this goes back to forever. So we're giving Judah, and you're not asking, and so I won't ask, but why is it Judah and not Joseph? Why did we have this whole long, wonderful story about Joseph? And then, okay, now we don't care about him, now we're going off to this other guy. But I think that is like, until things change, until the world is turned upside down, we got a king who's going to tell us what to do, and let's listen to our king.
Good. Okay, that's excellent what Matt gives us. One way to read this, and Matt's right that it works it works especially well through a critical historical perspective, is that some scholars, academic scholars, would say that the Torah was written during the days of King David, during the times of the actual monarchy in Israel. So they are writing in such a way as to establish their kingship and say, oh, even in the days of Jacob, this was being foretold, and Judah was going to be. We didn't know. The people on the ground, didn't know until King David arose. But now let's write it backwards as a prophecy that will seed the authority of King David. And Matt so brilliantly adds, it solves a narrative problem as well, because it doesn't seem like Judah has been the inheritor of Jacob's mantle, though Judah has served a very prominent role in Genesis. So it's not out of nowhere, but we would have expected the future, the leadership, the destiny to pass through Joseph, who actually was a king, sort of by the end of Genesis. And yet we have this sudden allusion to Judah as the great figure of leadership. And so it creates a kind of a new narrative, which threads nicely into King David. So that's very well done, Matt. David Kurtz.
I almost put my hand down because I was so in touch with Leah. I mean, this staff is so Moses, from in being a shepherd to Pharaoh to at the very end with the staff when it turns to a snake. But I kept it up because I did want to point out that in both Tanakh, JTS, and I went on Sepharia too, the line about Shiloh is not in there. It's absent from both of them. So I just wondered what your thoughts were on that.
Okay, yes. So let's see. First of all, Shiloh, nobody, as I said, knows exactly what it refers to. So is it the name of a person, and is a reference to, I played that Neil Diamond song, Shiloh, you always came, right? So is a reference to the Shiloh that will be coming, and that's just another name for Mashiach, for the Messiah. The justification for that is a little loose, though. It's like Shiloh, his. Well, doesn't tell us much. So many commentators read this not as a name, but instead until the one for whom it is his so I forget exactly how they translate it, but you could translate this until the coming of the one who will claim the kingship, and all peoples will revere him. Right. So it doesn't have to.
Yeah. It's missing in both. It's not a translation. It's just that line is deleted from.
Will you read us what you've got in front of you there?
Well, from Sepharia, it's the scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor shall the ruler's staff from between his feet, so that tribute shall come to him and the homage of his peoples be his. Same
Right.
thing in the Tanakh, JTS, it just eliminates that one line.
Okay.
It's just-
Okay, yes. So first of all, till tribute shall come to him is the translation. In other words, it shall be his. But you're right, there's another level. This is like everybody who's already confused, you can just turn off your brains for a sec. But if you want a little more information, there's another level, which is another interpretation is shai means a gift in Hebrew, a shai. So shai lo is a gift will be given to him. In other words, a tribute shall be offered to him. So the one, not just the one, the kingship is his, but the one who will deserve shai, which is tribute. And that's how we get to. So are we breaking up that word to mean something, or is the name of someone? That's part of the dilemma we're in. And all of which is to say, we really, it's not obvious. The Torah is definitely not being, if this is the Messiah, it's not clear that it's the Messiah, but all of this presents us with a dilemma, no matter how we translate it, because here we've established the power of Judah, the kingdom of Judah, and then we've got this other group, the group of the scholars, right? And this is a problem with Matt's interpretation as well. Yes, this establishes the kingdom of Judah, but Matt started to say at the end, until it changes. But yeah, why would they write, oh, eventually this will fall, or eventually someone else will come along? I mean, why would they allude to another group of scholars? That you can deal with, because maybe that's not what it means. Maybe that's just an interpretation. Actually, the staff and the scepter are Judah's. But until Shiloh comes, or until the coming of the one who will receive tribute, however you translate it, what's this like? And then one day things will change. And then one day things will change. Okay, let me give, just as we're now like 2/3 in, so I want to continue moving down the line, but we've now sort of worked through the two camps of King David and on the one hand, and maybe like some kind of Moses grouping on the other. So I want us thinking about those two models as two kinds of authority, right? Two kinds of rulership, because that's the way Rashi's trying to read it. It's not like Judah has lots of different, rods that he carries around, but that there's a political authority, and then there's the authority of scholarship. And there's a big question that we could ask any day of the week of our tradition, which is better, which is higher, which is holier, which is more revered in our tradition? Is it King David, or is it Moses? Is it the king, or is it the prophet? Is it the political leader, or is it the scholar? Right? Now, I don't know. I'm so inclined, I'm like rabbi, I'm rabbinic, like scholar, yay. But I don't know. King David was the ultimate figure of glory in our history in many ways. It doesn't seem like he's better than Moses, but surely he's celebrated. And we have the concept of the Mashiach, the Messiah, who is a king, right? Who is a monarch, who will have political power. That's part of the concept of the Messiah in our tradition, is that there will eventually be a leader who unites people under, the kingdom of God, really, which is like to say a leader who, like David, acknowledged the truth, the higher leader. But it was a political leader, someone appointed by God. So you can see we've got like these two figures, these two models for power that Rashi wants to read into the verse here. Okay, now where is Rashi getting this from? How does Rashi speculate in this way? So I want to show you the piece of Talmud that Rashi is drawing from, that does some more imagining, fleshes out a little bit more this idea that the scepter might refer specifically. Why is he mentioning the exilarchs, they sometimes call them the heads of the exile in Babylon. Once they had been exiled in the 6th century before the Common Era, those who ruled over that community. Why is he saying that? So let's take a look at the piece of Talmud that Rashi's drawing from. And this here will begin to deal with the question I just posed, which is better, which is superior, which is the ultimate form of power, political power or scholarly power? Okay. Here we are. Okay, this is from the Talmud tractate Sanhedrin. Rav says, Rav is a teacher. Rav says, one who wants to judge a case and wants to be exempt if he errs. Now, this means if you want to be a judge, if you want to have the authority to be a judge so that, like, listen, even if you make a mistake, you're still functioning in your role as a judge, and like, you're not going to be like, if you if you took the law into your own hands and decided a case, we might hold you responsible. But if you're an appointed judge, then you have the right to judge no matter whether you got it right or not. Okay. So this is sort of a funny way of saying one who wants the authority of a judge in the times of that the Talmud is speaking about here must receive permission from the exilarch. Okay, the exilarch, another way of saying the head of the exile community. Okay, and what this means is once the community is sent into exile and the Babylonians appoint leaders, and this is exactly, by the way, we saw Rashi say that before. Here's Rashi, who also commented on the entire Talmud, just, genius beyond genius. Rashi says they hold dominion over the people for they received the authority from the kings of Persia. So Rashi's very explicit that these exilarchs are the people who were appointed by foreign monarchs to rule over the people. But given that situation, if you want to be a judge in Israel, you have to get permission from the highest political authority in Israel, which in this case is in Babylon. For the exilarch, here is a scepter, and the nasi there is a staff. As it is taught, this is where Rashi gets it from. The scepter shall not depart from Judah. These are the exilarchs in Babylonia who hold dominion over the Jewish people with a scepter, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet. These are the grandchildren of Hillel the elder who teach Torah in public. Now, Rashi gave us a version of that. The scholars of the Torah, right? But here we have the grandchildren of Hillel the elder who teach Torah in public. And there's a reason why they're saying Hillel the elder, because Hillel was also a descendant of Judah. Okay, so now we got it both in the same verse. But okay, I know this is complicated, but the key piece here, right, we had arrived at a really critical question, which is Moses or David, right? Prophet, lawgiver, religious leader, or political appointed, even if through foreign powers, king, right? And the piece of Talmud that we are drawing from, what does it seem to say? If you want to be a lawgiver, you have to turn and get permission from the political leader. So I don't know what's better with a hierarchy, but we've got something going on here. Now we can begin to talk about some kind of relationship that exists between what we might call the executive and the judiciary, right? This is something we have to think about a lot in our country these days. Okay, so let's continue to churn through to answer this question: Moses or David, the political leader or the legal, spiritual, religious leader? Let's see what Hal has to say.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I've been thinking along these lines for a few minutes, but it seems to me that it's somewhat anachronistic maybe, but we are exactly talking about a system of checks and balances or divided rule, in the sense that I don't think the Jewish tradition ever subscribed to the notion of the divinity of kings the way other societies and monarchies did, the divine right of kings. That's not, and so what's the check on the kingship, it is. It's the law, or it's scholarship, or it's the prophetic tradition. Because, back when we did the house parties on kingship, a few years ago, before the BPE, before pandemic era, that was one of the points, that the prophets were what kept the kings in check, except, where they sometimes colluded with them for other reasons. So I think this notion of checks and balances, it's not either or, it's really both. And they exist in a kind of tension, because, really the true king is God, according to the liturgy. So that trumps all the rest of it. So.
Okay, good. Hal gives us so much, so succinctly and so correctly. And I think the framework that Hal offers is really helpful here, the framework of checks and balances, right? I'm asking the question in a more simplistic way. Which is better? Which do we like? Which is the kind of, but the verse here, at least as Rashi is reading it, refers to two kinds of groups of power. And so we can use this, modern concept of checks and balances and think, was there a system, there was some balancing of power system, even in the ancient world, even in our tradition. And yeah, you could say that let's just take the situation that the Talmud offers us. There are lots of different ways to think about this. I mean, Moses was never a king, and yet Moses was clearly the leader of the people of Israel because he had access to God and because he was a lawgiver. So one way to think about it is like, that's the ideal, and we never want a king to begin with. There's a lot of discussion around whether we want a king at all, but we do have these glorious kings, and we do speak about political power in this tradition. So one way of thinking about it is, well, it's checks and balances, so to speak. The king doesn't make the law. The king isn't the authority in matters of what God wants. Actually, we need a judge, a kind of prophetic figure for that. So the king doesn't have the kind of absolute authority another kind of king might. But on the other hand, as the Talmud lays it out, the judge doesn't have absolute authority either, because not since the days of Moses anyway. The judge has to have some kind of authority granted by a political system, and that's a form of checks and balances. Much as though it may have broken down, much as it is supposed to play out in our society, where the executive appoints the members of the judiciary, but the judiciary decides the laws that affect the executive. Okay, so good. So that's really, really helpful. We just have a few more minutes here, so let's see if we can ultimately get to Payam, to Laura, and to Jen. Payam.
I see this as the birth of man-made law, or more specifically rabbinic law. Moses only had divinic law with the staff, and then when you enter the scepter, you're adding a second kind of law, so that you're saying Judah represents both kinds of legal traditions. And then when the Messiah comes, you're only going to need one. Now, which one it's going to be, or they're going to combine. But so it's the creation of man-made law, or the rabbi saying we have also law, and they're both of them are necessary or something.
Good. Okay, so Payam helpfully kind of takes us to that last step. How's the Messiah fit into all of this? And I think Payam's intuition is right here, though I can't prove it, but it seems to me like that's a good way to deal with that third clause, which is to say that there's two kinds of power. And I'm thinking, also think about the way the scepter is who's not muted here? The scepter is regal, it's made of metal, it's shiny. The staff is just wood. It's more humble, it's more basic, it's more right. But and we have some sense that maybe political power is suspect in Jewish tradition, whereas that more King David comes from humble origins. Hillel comes from humble origins. They're like connected to God and to learning and to scholarship and to, right, different kind of power. And maybe suggests Spayam, that's the idea, is that these are two forms of power that will exist in society until someone is able to come and unite those two kinds of power, to wield political power, but to do so with the wisdom of scholarship or with the inspiration of prophecy. Okay, so that's a really kind of helpful framework and kind of takes us almost all the way to the end. What's the Messiah doing there? Let's see if we can hear from a couple of others before we close. Laura.
Thank you. Are we equating power and authority?
I don't know. What do you mean by the question?
One is are we saying that power and authority are equivalent?
I don't think we are. No, I think that, like in English, we would distinguish between the terms reshut, which is like the word that they're using to describe the Babylonians give them authority to wield power, and there we're using words like koach, or they are rodim, they dominate over. So the exercise of power is allowed for by if it's not seized by the bestowing of authority.
Thank you.
Does that make sense? Yeah.
In a way, thank you. That was helpful. My other question is, this the either or, the Moses or David. So both, what we know about both that they have in common, they're chosen by God. David is anointed. Moses is chosen by God. Okay, so what I'm wondering is, are there different ways of coming to the same thing? Does it have to be a choice?
Yeah, good. That's a good question. That's a good question, and an important point, which is that there's some suggestion. I keep saying, and it's a little too kind of cavalier to say political, spiritual. That I keep saying that, but the truth is, so well put, King David is tapped by God. That's sort of the point. And the Torah is our greatest source of prophecy. So to allude to a future rulership, dominion, power, authority, and after all, there are tribes. By the time we get to the book of Deuteronomy, we'll be talking about kings and state mechanisms and police and all that. So, but God is sanctioning this, so that's part of the system as well, right? So that's important to think about here as well. And I think that leads into, Payam's kind of set the end now here for us, and it leads into this vision where the ultimate anointed monarch would have both of those connections to God, the spirit of prophecy and inspiration and wisdom, but also the political mandate. Okay, one last comment from Jen.
So I'm going to actually back up to the beginning in terms of like Moses, and starting with Moses, because Moses helped to channel and set the conditions under which David could exist, the conditions under which there were even a people for David to rule. So I don't think that comparing it to like our judiciary and our executive branch makes sense. I think if we were going to compare it, it would be more to like the Declaration of Independence or the philosophical traditions that brought the country into being, hypothetically. And then the ways that we have to keep calling our country back to account for where it began, which also happens throughout the history of our peoples, being called into account. And the idea that calling ourselves into account for that and bringing ourselves closer to the starting philosophies, the starting spiritual basis from Moses is part of getting to the Messiah. So I think that I think the Moses side, like it's a foundation throughout, it's a goal throughout. It really is on a deeper level than the political power in this sense.
Yeah, I think that's an important, at least like a suggestion of reframe there, which is to say it's not just checks and balances, but that there's a distinct system here, and in that system, Jen reminds us, at least as our tradition has now formulated it, right? Critical historical perspectives aside, Moses is the source. Moses is the ultimate leader. And I said, but then you have King David, and isn't King David glorious? And King David is glorious, but King David, forgive me for saying so, King David, I bear his name, is no Moses. Lo kam Yisrael od. Like there was no one else like Moses. Moses had a direct channel in a way that nobody. That's sort of our tradition has been built on that notion. And Moses's direct channel, it was based on the idea that he was just communicating some higher truth, some higher principle. And he technically did not hold political power. And that is because one strong voice in the tradition would suggest, and I think Jen agrees with that voice, that this tradition doesn't want kings, right? We heard that sentiment earlier. This is not the ideal. To get to it, we'd rather not have a king at all because God is king. I think Hal said that. God is king, right? And the idea of God being king, it's just a metaphor that means no human being should ever wield ultimate authority over another. And so this language of dominion, it feels a little like, what do you mean they hold dominion over us? And the little suggestions along the way that, and actually the Persians granted them that dominion. And later the Romans will grant leaders in the land of Israel dominion, but that kind of power is always suspect. Political power is always suspect because it is power for power's sake. It's power traded amongst people for power's sake. And often for personal gain. Whereas the power that Hillel, that Moses has, is the power of their either direct channel, which, that'd be great if we had direct channel, but if not that, at least the power of their wisdom, of their study, of their thoughtfulness, of the power of their consciousness. The power of the development of their soul and their psyche and their mind, and that we do revere in this tradition. So there's more to be said here, but I think I'll just end on the note that Payam so helpfully suggested for us a few minutes ago, which is to say, it does seem that the way that Rashi lays it out, it's like there's political power and there will always be political power. And that's just, was that an ideal? I don't know. But even in times of exile, we'll need someone to be in charge. That's just human life. But let's not forget that there's also the power of Torah, the power of truth, the power of humility, the power of spirituality, right? And that's the power that we really esteem in this tradition. Ad Shiavo Shiloh, until the Messiah comes, and who is the Messiah? Payam, I think said very well. The Messiah, whatever it is some figure of leadership that embodies. Yes, it becomes the political leader, but esteems that same sort of spiritual power, and that person could really redeem us all. People ask me sometimes. I'll close on this note, even though it might be a provocative one. People ask me sometimes do I really believe in the Messiah? It's one of the faith principles, and the Messiah will come and the Messiah will unite all of humanity under this sort of kingdom of God. And my response at a certain point became, well, I don't know. I mean, like, look at Gandhi. Like Gandhi liberated India and demonstrated leadership in some part through his spiritual vision. And so if someone could do that in one country, I can imagine someone whose spiritual vision was so compelling that it created a kind of a unified political power as well. So in that sense, I believe that a Messiah could come, and may the Messiah come speedily in our days, as the blessing goes, and unite us under a vision of power based in truth and ethics and universal care and respect, and not craven political power. That's a blessing we can end on, right? Okay. Thanks everybody for this. And next week we will turn to the book of Exodus.
Thank
Shabbat
you.
shalom. Bye.
Shiach now.
Thank you.
Yes, now indeed.
Thank you.
Let's go. Let's go.
Wonderful.
We don't want to wait.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi. And I will be raising my hand by asking Matt to raise his hand because my stupid Zoom, I can only give you a thumbs up or a party.
Okay. All right. That's fine. All right. We'll do that next time. Thanks. Bye all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.